be discussing the Made by Sport Clubs in Crisis grant programme. The reason why we like to do these things is often grant programs go on websites and they're not always clear, or there's lots of questions, and it's just a really good opportunity to run through this grant program and then an opportunity to ask questions. So it's a really good thing for us to do these live. Introductions. We have got 3 GCF people. So we've got Sarah, who you've been in touch with, who's the head of our grant making as our grant manager. And we've got 3 in the team. We've expanded fairly quickly this year. And then we've got Louisa Hancox, who's from Active Gloucestershire, who's going to be working in partnership with us. So it's absolutely brilliant to bring the 2 organisations together, as Active Gloss has got such great connections and is doing incredible work across the county, getting people active with the We Can Move programme. So it's great that we've been able to team up. The Made by Sport programme, the overview will be gone through by Sarah. Louisa will then do a little bit of an introduction about their role, and then we'll just have a quick question and answer, and anything that we can offer in terms of how to apply, what's applicable, etc., and any burning questions. Okay, next slide, please. Just a quick overview for those who don't know who the Gloucestershire Community Foundation is. So we're part of a national network, and a reason why the Made by Sport money is come to us, because the Made by Sport money was originally approached to UKCF, which we're a membership organisation. UKCF supports the membership. So Made by Sport came to them, and they have distributed this fund across all 47 community foundations where they're able to accept this funding. I think only maybe 2 or 3 haven't been able to due to capacity issues, but generally these sorts of grants go across the whole of the country, which is really exciting. And just to see the opportunities that go across the country and where we can compare how that's delivered and the feedback and the impact. So as a network, we've delivered over £1 billion worth of grants. So we sit as I guess our financial model is an endowment model. We do have flow through funding, which is what this funding is, but essentially community foundations have an endowment. We've got a £7 million endowment, and we use the proceeds of that endowment to go straight into grant making. And the reason why an endowment's such a great structure and process for giving is that it's there forever and we never spend that down. So while we're long gone, this money will sit in our communities forever. So it's a great model. So where we're increasing our endowment so we can increase our grant making, but at the same time we do take flow through funds, which is what the Made by Sport money is. So last year, I think collectively as a UK community foundation network, we delivered 98 million in grants. So we're one of the top grant making groups in the country. We are a membership organisation, that's our structure. So UKCF are our governing body, and we're assessed a bit like Ofsted, where we're assessed every 3 years. We're just actually going through an assessment now. It's our 3-year assessment. And where every part of our organisation is looked at. So it's a great piece of sense checking that we can do as a community network foundation across the country, where we share best practice and we make sure we're a continually improving organisation. So we focus on grassroots organisations. So where you look at the average across the UK foundation network, monetary giving is around 4,000. So it's small amounts to small grassroots organisations where we feel that it's the lifeblood of our community, and we really need to support our smaller organisations where they're absolutely vital to the people who need support in our county. So as we have an endowment and we're not necessarily relying on the bucket shaking, if you like, and the constant money raising on some area, as much as we do take flow through funding in, the piece around having some secured funding means we can fund where others may not, maybe those less popular issues, and we also may be able to fund those that are overlooked. We used to say the hidden, but probably not hidden, more the overlooked. So that's where our funding can be vital, where there's areas in our community that do not get the representation needed. We really are trying to work hard at levelling up. So that's the piece of work that we are very much working towards. We're by no means there, but we are making some good efforts and some good improvements at supporting right across our county. So in 2020, our grant making increased fourfold. So like I'm sure we've all gone through an incredible year this year, with service demand going up, with income streams maybe drying up, and you know, it's been a hugely challenging time for us all. So we've gone from an average of £300,000 a year, and we've now gone to about 1.2 million last year. So for a tiny team, this was an enormous increase for the grants team, and the overall support that comes from the other areas of our organisation, including our very supportive board, and many of the members ended up being volunteers for us. So they worked incredibly hard, and some of them even working full time for us. So it's been an incredibly challenging year, but in that challenging year, we've been able to do so much more in terms of support, but we've also got to know so many more people, and our networks have developed enormously. So hence being able to encourage, with the UK CF network, most of the community foundations have increased their grant giving enormously, and the NET, which is the National Emergencies Trust, came to us as their main partner. So the whole of the UK really did do an incredible job at distributing enormous amounts of funds, about 50 million plus, and that means we've now just started to get some real recognition from lots of different groups, hence this Made by Sport money coming through the network. So I would imagine, and we hope, that further UK networks will start giving more money through local areas like what's coming through in this one. So hopefully it's not the end of, and it's just the start of much more funding coming into our county. So I'll pass you on. That's a little bit about our foundation and us. I'll pass you on to Sarah, who will start going through the finer detail of the programme.
No, thank you, Talitha. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of who Made by Sport are. They're a charity that raises awareness of the power of sport to change lives, and they also raise funds to enable organisations to do just that. They want to shape a stronger future for young people and believe that sport's the best way to achieve that. So that's what the Clubs in Crisis programme is really all about, is how sport and any other physical activity can support young people with their development. They say we need sport now more than ever to build a stronger tomorrow, following on from the COVID pandemic and the lockdown that we've all been experiencing. I think young people have particularly suffered during that time, with their mental health, social life, education has all been affected, and the belief of this programme is that sport can really help, following on from lockdown, to bring back some of that social element to their lives and bring some fun and some opportunities to learn and develop. So Made by Sport, as Talitha has said, was awarded funds across our Community Foundation network, and we've been really fortunate to be able to receive a share of that money. And we should be around, we're awarding about 20 grants of £2,021. It's a bit of a gimmick that the programme have decided to set up as we're in 2021. So who can apply to the fund? It can be sports clubs or community groups, but it just needs to be work that intentionally uses sport to deliver social outcomes. So that can include developing life skills, improving mental health, reducing crime and antisocial behaviour, developing employability skills, or building stronger communities. So it's quite a broad range of different things that those activities that can be supporting. We'll support sports clubs and organisations as long as you're based in Gloucestershire. You can apply. It is very targeted towards smaller groups, this programme. So it's looking at organisations with a turnover of less than £75,000, with a priority given to small groups with a turnover less than £25,000. In terms of what the funding can be spent on, it's quite flexible really, so it could cover core costs, capital costs, so if there's equipment or things like that that you need to spend money on, or club buildings that need repairs, any of those sorts of things. As long as your work is with young people, it can fund that, it can fund salaries. So it's really quite open what that grant can be spent on. The size of the grant is £2,021. If you need less than that, you can apply for less if you wanted to. There are just a few restrictions as well for the grant. So it's aimed really at organisations that can demonstrate that the COVID pandemic has affected the work. That can be in any way, whether it's the work you're able to do, finances, and it's for any community sports clubs, but you do need to be working on developing opportunities for young people, so not just sport opportunities to participate in sport, but also looking at some of those things like improving mental health, employability, strengthening communities. So it needs to have one of those sports development elements to the work. We can't support individuals through the project, or sole traders or private companies or government or arranged organisations. Oh, skipped a bit. And it needs to be organisations with a turnover of less than £75,000, as I said before. And organisations based in our county will be supported through our particular programme, but organisations outside Gloucestershire, there probably is a likelihood there would be a Made by Sport funding programme for a local area as well. So if you do come across organisations in other parts of the country, then do point them in the direction of the Made by Sport website, because there is more information there, and it'll link through to all the different community foundations across the country. So in terms of making an application, our application form is on our website, on our Made by Sport programme page. The applications will close on the 14th of May. Then we'll conduct our assessments, and we've got a panel meeting taking place towards the end of June. So we'll be giving decisions about the grants by the end of June. Depending on how many funds we've got left, we may also then be running a second round of the programme, which would be closing on the 27th of August. But if we receive lots of applications for this first round that we want to support, then it's not guaranteed that we would run that second round if we use our funds, because we've received lots of good applications in the first round. We'll probably close it there. So it is worth applying sooner rather than later. I'm just going to pass over to Louisa now, who will talk a little bit about Active Gloucestershire and their work.
Thank you, 20 minutes.
Thank you, Sarah. That went very quickly. I was enjoying listening to that all. So yeah, hello everybody. My name is Louisa, and I work for the charity Active Gloucestershire. And just want to kind of echo what's been said before, that we're just very happy and grateful to Gloucestershire Community Foundation for securing some much needed funding for the county's kind of sports clubs and groups. So thanks Talitha, Sarah and team for that. And for those that don't know us, Active Gloucestershire is an active partnership, so we are one of about 40 something or another across the country. You may have heard of us previously as a county sports partnership, and in the last couple of years that they changed name to Active Partnerships. just to include general movement really, rather than just a sport focus, because we are all about just moving more rather than just sport. Active Gloucestershire has got a remit of to reach and support clubs and communities in Gloucestershire, and to get more people to be more active. And we work with lots of national governing bodies, people like the Activity Alliance as well, and of course Sport England, who is probably our major stakeholder there. We also coordinate something that Talitha mentioned earlier, something here called We Can Move, which is our a county-wide commitment to ensure that everyday physical activity is possible for everybody. And so with this, we work across lots of different sectors. We look at influencing and changing policy, infrastructure, and then of course kind of individual behaviour change programmes as well. The We Can Move community is a community of people basically just encouraging other people to feel happier and healthier and feel the benefits of being physically active. And support available through the We Can Move programme, which I think is on the next slide, Sarah, if you don't mind, sorry. That's it, is through the Changemaker programme that we have, and there's lots of support that's available. So there are other funding opportunities, so if you didn't feel like your group was perhaps eligible for this fund, there are we kind of signpost to other funding opportunities as well, or if you need more funding. We have lots of training and events, load of toolkits, advice and guidance about return to play and making your sport or your activity, you know, being well prepared for COVID restrictions and adapting your service and delivery, access to lots of networks and insights. So you can see there's the website there, wecanmove.net, and there's a specific section for support that's available. And we also send out regular funding alerts. It's every kind of couple of weeks to the latest funding opportunities that are available. And we have a monthly Changemaker newsletter, which covers lots of different groups, if you're working with older adults, if it's a sports club, children, schools, etc., and lots of advice, guidance and latest thinking that we pull together in a monthly news. And then also if you wanted to sign up to the club's newsletter too. So if you've got any questions about that, just feel free to drop me an email or visit the website, and we'd be very, very happy to help. And that's it. Thank you.
I think that's the end of us speaking, so it's just an opportunity now really to ask any questions that you'd like to ask. I'm just going to stop the screen share so that I can see everybody again.
Anyone like to ask any questions? Sharon, hello.
Hi there. Yeah, it's just I hadn't appreciated the limit on turnover, which makes GDA ineligible. But I'm wondering about Gloucester Deaf Club potentially bidding for this kind of money, because they do struggle to engage with young people because of the trend for young children to be fitted with cochlear implants has meant that they're not connecting with their elders as such. So I'm guessing that would be acceptable to just share the information with them and then encourage them to make an application potentially.
Absolutely. I mean, if you could be an infrastructure organisation, if you can help, you know, the little smaller groups, that would be amazing. You know, sometimes applications can be a bit daunting. So if you can reach out to any of the smaller groups, we would really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I will. And also, sorry, you haven't got your name, Active Gloucestershire. What was your name?
Louisa.
Oh, sorry,
Louisa, sorry.
I could change that. That would be helpful. I'll do that now. Yes.
No, it's fine. I'm just really bad with remembering people's names. But Louisa, it'd be great to have your email as well, just to hook up about the We Can Move programme, because I was just trying to find the statistic about the of young deaf people engaging in sport and not being able to because of the barriers that they face, it's quite a high statistic compared to their sort of hearing peers. So
yeah,
that'd be really good to pick that up with you.
yeah, and we've got somebody that leads on oh, I've spelled Gloucestershire wrong in my email address, so I was just popping it in the chat for you so you can just copy it over. Gloucestershire, yeah, that's right. Yes, we've got somebody who's our head of insight and intelligence, so they'll be able to get you lots of kind of any statistics that are useful. We've got the Active Live survey that's coming out, I think, later this week, so we can help on that front, or just, yeah, let's have a chat and see what we can do. Thanks, Erin.
Brilliant, thank you.
Anybody else? Hi, Marie.
Oh, you're on mute, Marie.
Yeah, sorry, can I pick up further on that point about the 75,000 turnover? That's always a difficult one, because some charities like the Chamwell Centre, which I represent, have a very big capital outlay, and you know, we've just completed a £5.1 million building, but our actual operational turnover is very much less. So we constantly come across this problem that we can't apply for grants because there's this limit, but actually most of our turnover is committed funding for the building, whereas we're actually applying grants to run services. I don't know if you've got any comments on that.
Yeah, and I think for this one, because it's a programme we're running nationally, they're not our guidelines that we've devised. These are guidelines that we've been given by Made by Sport, and they very much felt that they wanted to target much smaller organisations with this programme. If I don't know whether, I think there are organisations that are bigger that would benefit from this money, because I've already had some applications along those lines, or people who've been in touch. So it might be something that we as an organisation look at, if you've got programmes like that we might be able to support through some of our other grants programmes, but unfortunately our hands are a bit tied with this particular programme, just because of their target and the way that they wanted to structure the programme.
Well, okay.
Can I also add, Marie, hello, by the way, there's also another, which has been really interesting with this particular programme, because Made by Sport will support kind of capital costs, whereas a funding programme run by Sport England that is being administered in a similar way, I guess, to this, in that they're working with local partnerships, active partnerships, to administer the Active Communities COVID Recovery Fund. That is just for revenue funding, so that could well be a funding pot that Chamwell Centre could look into. So I can send you some more information about that, if that's helpful.
Thank you, that would be helpful. The other thing is, I can see Kieran is here from Goes Beyond Grass, and we were particularly thinking about this funding pot, because we're going to be hooking up to offer both frame football and parterre football at the Chamwell Centre. So we wondered whether a joint up might be appropriate, or you know, I don't know what Goes Beyond Grass's turnover is, but whether they
unfortunately we wouldn't be eligible for this one either. But the fund which Louisa just spoke about could be a good one for that project, I think.
Yeah, we'll be back in touch with you, Louisa.
Yeah, and I think this is useful for us as well to note how many organisations are interested in the funding who aren't eligible for that reason, because it's something that we can feed back for future grant programmes, that there are actually quite a lot of organisations that would really benefit from that size of grant, but who have a larger turnover. So I think,
yeah, I think like
really
with us,
for us.
Sorry, go on.
I was saying it's all really useful for us, but yeah, I'm sorry that it's not applicable for today, unfortunately.
No, that's okay. It's not a problem. For us, it's just because obviously we've got several clubs, but under our organisation, so it'd be really good for like one of our clubs, but our organisation as a whole, because it's got multiple projects, is obviously over. But yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. It makes perfect sense. So
and
thank
again,
you very much.
Something we could look at if you've got smaller clubs that you're working with that could apply for funding to be working with you. To sort of be an infrastructure organisation that could use those funds to support those clubs if they wanted to apply individually, perhaps pay the grant by yourselves if they're too small to have their own constitution.
Okay, brilliant. That's handy to know. Excellent, thank you.
Hi there, Peter.
Hi, I'm just here representing a fairly small tennis club. Our turnover is well below 25,000 a year, but we have a fairly good coaching program which involves, you know, a reasonable number of young people. Are we the kind of people you're after? I mean, is this the sort of, are we, you know, eligible to apply? Are we sort of hitting the right spot, as it were?
I think so. In terms of the size of your organisation, I think that would work. And if you've got projects that you're working with younger people, it's a case of demonstrating in your application which of those sport development areas that your work would be.
Well, I mean,
the work
it's difficult in a way because it's not exactly dealing with underprivileged sort of young people, but you could say they're developing life skills by being coached tennis. I mean, is that the kind of thing that would make sense to you, or am I way off track?
I think as long as you just would need to demonstrate what you're doing to achieve those things. So the criteria say intentionally working towards some of those goals. So as long as you're able to say that in the work you're doing, the reasons why you're doing it, and that you are trying, your project that you're doing is trying to work towards those goals, then I think it could be eligible. But it is looking more at where you're thinking about those young people and their needs beyond playing the sport, but also the other things that
I mean, we're definitely a grassroots organisation, and we're trying our best to develop tennis skills, and that you know, that, well, tennis definitely sort of relates to life in various sort of ways, and so maybe, yeah, okay.
Peter, whereabouts is your tennis club?
Nailsworth.
Oh, okay. Is there any way that you could encourage people from more disadvantaged backgrounds to have an opportunity to be involved?
Well, I mean, we do try, but I mean, in many ways, it's a bit more difficult. I mean, there are disadvantaged kids in Nailsworth, believe it or not. I mean, it might sound like a relatively affluent area, but I mean, the place is up Forest Green and so on. I mean, you know, they're quite poor, a lot of the people who live up there. So
I mean, we would love to encourage any sporting organisations where it's generally privileged children, that, you know, where the fees are high, like tennis or, you know, golf or whatever. You know, if there's some really, it's a bit like we've got a grant for people to have opportunities to take up an instrument, or, you know, or music, where they just wouldn't have that opportunity. So if there is a way of encouraging clubs to encourage people from, you know, that wouldn't usually get the opportunity, that's the sort of thing we'd love to fund. So if you're looking to be funded for projects, and you can demonstrate you're attracting a diverse group of young people, that would be wonderful.
How would you demonstrate that, though? I mean, that's quite difficult in a way, isn't it, to actually show that on paper, don't you think?
Not really. I mean, it may be something you can talk to the grants team about, that, you know, where we get applications, people really clearly demonstrate exactly their beneficiary groups. They, you know, it's like marketing segmentation, or, you know, you can put young people, where they've come from or backgrounds, or you can even put some stories in there. You can say there's, you know, the particular person that's come from a particular area that would have had no opportunity before, but they've come to you and they're showing real talent, or, you know, just having an opportunity to play tennis. You know, some of the tennis pros that have come through have needed real funding and opportunity and haven't necessarily come from money backgrounds, and it just takes some of these organizations to have a bit of funding to give opportunity to maybe people with skills that they just wouldn't get a chance otherwise. So you can demonstrate it. It's confidential, so when you do an application and you're demonstrating something, it's confidential, so it's not something that's shared. So if you do put something personal in there or a story, then obviously that would just demonstrate to us.
Okay, all right, thanks.
I think, as Talita said, it's a lot of the time it is the stories and show the impact on particular individuals, so that you can demonstrate who you've been working with, and you could then demonstrate how they've benefited in particular ways that relate to those sports development criteria. If you have young people who fit with that in the work that you're doing.
A quick question, Peter. Are you a membership only organisation, or do you open your facilities for wider community use?
Well, the young people don't have to be members, actually. I mean, they can just sort of turn up to be coached. So it's membership in terms of adults, yeah, but not necessarily for coaching, no.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So as an example, if it's a free to access program, that's one of the things that can potentially be a barrier to people who might not be able to afford the coaching. So that's one way that you're demonstrating that you are making tennis more accessible for people. So it's maybe,
I mean, on occasions there have been people who have you know, backed particular individuals, you know, just given them coaching free because, you know, it's realized that they've got, you know, very limited resources themselves. So yeah, but essentially, yeah, it is a members organization which allows coaching to anyone who wants to take part. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you. Okay.
Anybody else? Mark, do you have anything?
Yeah, a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes I get feedback off my laptop. That's why I asked if you could hear me properly. But
no, very clear.
So I represent sort of two organisations. So the primary one is a sporting association which covers cricket, football, tennis at youth and adult level. So that's like an umbrella organisation, and I'm also involved with the football club within that organisation. So the first thing was you use the term young people. Now, what is a young person within your definition? So that's my first question. And similar to the chap that was talking from Nailsworth Tennis Club, we're from Minchinhampton, which in itself is quite an affluent area, but it's very much a town of haves and have-nots and not much in between. And we recently went, the football club went for a one of these restart grants through the Football Association, and primarily to restart after the pandemic, or to try and restart sport whilst we're still in the pandemic. And we were told that we were eligible because we were in an area that was deprived enough, which seemed odd, you know. So they just picking a postcode and saying, well, you know, there's a lot of nice houses in that area. Because we've got a situation in our club specifically where we will never, or up till now, we would never stop somebody playing a sport because they couldn't afford to play. You know, we would always find a way to include them and not charge them the match fee or the joining fee or whatever. But because of a loss of sort of income streams and coming into the club, particularly over the last couple of years, we're having to look at that more closely now, because effectively the whole activity becomes at risk by not having the full team paying their match fees. So we're having to, you know, and we're in this sort of, you know, you don't qualify because you're in a supposedly affluent area, but we're trying to provide opportunities for people that ordinarily wouldn't be able to afford it. So we've got that sort of conundrum. But as a sporting association, we cover all areas, so multi-sports, youth, girls teams, specifically girls teams and adult teams. So is that sort of is that an area where we would perhaps be able to apply?
Yeah, and I would say usually under 18 is what's classified, although that can sometimes be stretched. It doesn't actually specify. I've just been checking through the criteria to see if it specifies what a young person would be, but I don't think it does. I will do another double check and I can email you later with a proper answer to that. In terms of deprived areas, I think as a community foundation, we're very aware that you can get extreme poverty backed onto some very wealthy areas, and we see that a lot. And I live in Cheltenham, and quite often Cheltenham's seen as a wealthy area, but it's got some of the most deprived areas in the country, in fact, in certain parts of it. So we don't tend to look just on a postcode. We tend to build a knowledge of an area, and we do understand that most areas do have a mixture of different families and different people living in them. So we certainly wouldn't rule you out based on the area that you're in. It's more about what you can tell us about the people you're working with. And certainly if you're telling us that you would like to be able to reduce fees or be able to provide spaces to young people because they can't afford to come to your club, but it's also causing you a difficulty that you can't afford to run some of your sessions for that reason, then that's a pretty strong argument really for needing that funding. Yeah.
So will we be better applying as individual sports clubs or as a sort of an umbrella organisation that facilitates sports for different age groups across different sports? Because I wear two hats. I'm the chairman of the football club, but I'm also the secretary of the sports association. So I was tasked with coming online to just get a better understanding.
There's no reason you can't have both. If they're two completely individual organisations where there's need and you can demonstrate need, there's no reason why you can't apply for both organisations. As long as you're under the 75 turnover. So it's just hitting the criteria really.
Oh, we're definitely under that. I mean, in terms of the sports association, what we've tried to do is to allow access to areas of the sports field for groups outside of the main sort of the main members of our organisation. So, for instance, we've got a group that do Tai Chi, and they're predominantly, I'd say, at least 70 plus. Looking at the group there, and they've not been able to practice Tai Chi normally where they would do it indoors, so they've been coming on the sports field and doing that. And there's a few other groups that we'd like to include that can use the field when it's not really used, sort of normally during the day. There's also a homeschooling group. I'm not sure it's homeschooling, but it's like an alternative schooling group that want to use the playing field for outdoor activities. But again,
I think if it's targeting young people, then you'd be able to justify it. So it is purely there for young people, giving opportunity where they probably wouldn't otherwise. So if you can encourage more young people to be using facilities and us supporting young people to grow and develop, then there's a good case there.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Anybody who hasn't spoken and like to ask a question? Rowena, I can't quite see you, but is it something you want to come in and have a chat with us? Or are you just having a listen? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute.
Ooh, sorry.
That's all right.
Not very good at these things. Is that better? Sorry.
That's fine.
Yes, no, definitely interested. We definitely meet the criteria that you've explained today, you know, definitely under the 25,000 turnover. So I think that what we're thinking about is after school clubs and trying to, as soon as they allow, because at the moment bubbles and going into schools, at the moment they're not allowing so many clubs to go in, but it comes September, when hopefully they relax on the COVID rules of going into schools. We're hoping to go back to after school clubs and maybe go to some schools that have children that can't afford to go to, because we're a karate club, perhaps children that can't afford to go to a big club and pay all the fees, but to actually focus going into schools where the children can't afford the expensive classes. So, you know, that might be something we perhaps could put forward for funding, maybe.
Brilliant. Anything giving opportunity to those who wouldn't usually get opportunities, that sounds great.
No, I'm definitely one for us. It's good. Thank you very much.
Okay,
We're very interested.
Great. I did see a hand up. Was that Bren? Did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
Hello.
Thanks, Talitha, really. I think there's a number of ways that you can look at areas of greater need, really, and I completely agree that affluent areas by postcode really mask some inequalities as well, same as some areas of greater need mask some people that are quite affluent as well, really. So I think there's a number of ways that you can look at areas of greater need. So some of the groups that I proudly support, really, they just don't have the time, Talitha, to put an application in. They just don't have the time, really. I know it's something I've spoken to Sarah about, whatever, really. So my first question is, how simple are these forms? That's the first question. And the second question is, if we know what we know, and these groups, and they just literally have a choice between doing what they do to support. I can think of an organisation that supports young people in care, really, you know, and that's their absolute focus. They just don't have the time to even look at the application, fill it in, or whatever, really. So it's a question I posed and will keep posing as well. Is again, who are we supporting for the reasons that we know?
Thanks, Bren. Do you know, barriers to funding is something that we are looking at. It's come through our research, but there's situations like this which we are tied. So the money's come to us and we have to distribute it within the criteria that's set by us. So this isn't one that we have a lot of say in terms of structure. However, it's fairly light touch. I'm sure Sarah can go through it. But where it comes to GCF and our own funding, that's where we have more opportunity to influence to some extent. So there's pieces around structure. We use the system Salesforce. There's only so much that we can change within certain systems of operating, but there's how do we reduce barriers? And if it is down to people not being able to maybe even have the confidence to apply, maybe the language barrier, all sorts of barriers, they're things that we've got to work on. So is it that we have someone in situ that can help people physically fill and go through applications? I mean, Sarah spends a huge amount of her time supporting one-to-one with people. The amount of emails and conversations she has is a huge amount of time. So there's definite support there. But like you say, where we've got little small community groups who, you know, are trying to do what they're supposed to be doing and delivering services and struggling to get round to applying for funding, then we need to really explore what some of the other barriers are. Is it something within our gift that we can support with, or is it down to other things control, and maybe it's more of a community thing? Because funding is so vital that when you're a tiny little organisation, even GCF, you know, there's only a tiny team, we say, God, we just don't have enough time in the day to sort out money and funding, but we have to, because we've got to pay our bills and we've got to pay our overheads. So, you know, some of it could be around mentoring or support. You know, are there some people that could actually support those groups or clubs to help apply, to give them that support in the application process, to get them a bit more business focused in terms of you're going to have to find some money, and that is a priority. So how do you make time for it, or how do you get support in that area? So it is a question that's incredibly valid and that we need to be working on. And like I say, you know, if you've got any suggestions how we can make things easier, we're always here to hear.
So one of my suggestions, and the long and short of it, it's still complex, but I think it's one of those we know what we know sort of thing. So it's kind of like we know that. So if we do know that, is there anything? So you know, I've said and to the VCS Alliance people as well and others in the county, is that you know you might want to consider coming together as Gloucestershire funders and funding a bid writer that specifically works with smaller community organisations. And heard about the threshold or whatever as an example of the finances or whatever really.
Yeah.
The bigger organisations, I believe, will always find their way to the table one way or another, really, in my limited knowledge and experience. And that's not to say, you know, it's a competition between the bigger ones and the smaller ones, but that's just how I personally see it, and I've seen it for quite a long time, really. But again, going back to your, what is your suggestion, Brenda? That's my suggestion, really.
Okay.
That there's a person who's employed specifically to do that, with a specific remit of smaller organisations, as opposed to we employ somebody that there is for all organisations. And then I think what will happen again is the bigger organisations will make sure that they are there at the table, and the smaller ones can't even get to the table for the reasons that I've identified. That's a generalisation, but that's my view. Yeah,
no, valid point.
Ben, can I just add to that? I know obviously, you know, certain borough councils fund specific kind of funding application support. So Tewkesbury, for example, they've got a dedicated officer there to help people with their funding applications and their support in Cheltenham and things like that. I think, I completely agree. I think the loudest voices sometimes are the ones that are heard, and that doesn't help reach the overlooked that Talitha was talking about before. I think with this fund it is difficult because there are restrictions by the original kind of grant maker essentially. But for example, with the Tackling Inequalities Fund, the Active Communities Fund that Sport England have recently launched the phase 3 of through Active Gloucestershire Partnership, the application form is an expression of interest and the rest is a conversation, specifically to test a different way of applying for funds, but still making sure that it's robust because it's taxpayers' money. So it is striking that sweet spot, as well as with the foundation with individuals' donors' money, isn't it, to make sure that we're getting all the information that we need. So we're in the third phase of that, and it's been going really well so far. So we'll share that learning as well with as part of that Gloucestershire Funders network too. But I think, like you say, Talitha, it's also kind of having people like Bren and other people who are aware of these smaller organisations and organisations that are there to help those people as well. And Active Gloucestershire would be very happy to help applicants, particularly around the active communities recovery funding. So again, if you want to talk to me about that at another point, Bren, I'd be very happy to talk to you.
It's something that I just don't think in the Gloucestershire funders, St Gloucestershire, and probably outside Gloucestershire as well, that has been cracked in terms of how do we, and you're absolutely right with public funds, how do we make that accountable versus how do we address the need that we know that's there as well, really? How do we get those balances right? Which is why I say again, I think that Gloucestershire funders need to come together and employ a bid writer that will specifically work with those smaller community groups. And we've identified a threshold in terms of how that could be, for instance, looked at and whatever. And until I think we do that, I still think that we will know what we all know, but the things that we put in place, and I know they're in place for a reason, valid reason, etc., but we're still not addressing those inequities in the smaller groups, and that's what I see day after day.
Thanks, Bren.
Bren, as well, do you get them to get in touch with me? Because if they give me a call, then I can try my best to help. But I think if I as you say, you only know what you know, and if I don't know those groups are wanting to get funding but are not able to, then I can't help them to get the funding. I sort of try and reach out as much as I can to different groups and do research and try and work out who I can contact, but I don't think that necessarily reaches those groups that are sort of under the radar.
So I mean, it's always really good to put practical examples, isn't it, really? So I've done that exactly just that, really. And I spoke to the treasurer of the Gloucester Bangladeshi Association, really. And I think what it is, if I'm honest, Sarah, is the fact that we have to go out, really, rather than the people contact you and that, really. So I think that's two things. Firstly, they need to be visible in the areas and with the people that they're, you know, looking to help and whatever. But I did say, you know, here's Sarah's number and give them a call and whatever, really. But I think, it sounds paradoxical, really, but that's the bit about, again, getting to the people on their terms. So their terms would be that they would probably want you to go out and whatever and physically sit down with them. And it's, you know, it's hugely time consuming with all those smaller community organisations. I get that, and I don't overlook that and whatever, really. But whatever we're doing at the moment ain't doing it, really, in terms of what I see and whatever it is. It's not really scratching the surface with some of those smaller groups and whatever, really.
I mean, there's a couple of things, Brent. There's capacity.
What we are doing, and then actually what we could do and what we could do different. And maybe those won't be all the answers, but at the moment or whatever, really, I would say we're just not getting there. Sorry, Talitha.
That's all right. No, there's a couple of things. I think in a pandemic, we haven't been able to see each other. Sarah started last January before the pandemic, and that was the first time we've had an in-house grant maker, and we've developed the team rapidly. You know, our goal is to be able to go out and reach out and visit. That's something we've always done as a community foundation, and our trustees are a big part of that. So even Jamie the other day said, right, as soon as I can start visiting people, let me know and get me a list together, because I want to start visiting people. So, you know, some of it, there's capacity. You know, we run on a shoestring like most other charities, and we don't necessarily have free resource. The amount of extra workload this year means everybody's doing more than the hours they should be doing, and we need to, in our own, when you say people just don't have time, you know, we've then got to make the space and time to say, right, we need more capacity, we need to find that funding to help us continue to grow, and if visits and time out of the office needs to be worked in, that's something that we need to work in, and it's something we talked about before the pandemic, so it's definitely on our radar, and we will definitely start getting out and about once we can. And I think once the 17th of May happens, I'm sure things will start getting back to a bit more normality where we can. But like you say, you know, every single small community group has a different way of engaging, and, you know, just having one process isn't going to fit all. And that's the thing we have, isn't it? That we set these structures and processes up and it keeps people out. So those barriers are something we're looking at, but we've got to do it within a cost-effective way that we can afford to do. Because if I start sending Sarah out to go and visit lots of community groups, we probably won't get our grant making done. So, you know, there's two sides to it, that we've got to have the capacity to do it, but it's a really valid point. I think the other thing about helping people fill out, I mean, Active Gloucestershire are absolutely brilliant, and they do actually help. So within this grants program, they've offered us that resource to help people actually apply. So when I spoke to Tom, who you know, he was very supportive, and why we've teamed up with Active Gloucestershire is having that extra support. So if a group does come to us and says, look, we really need some help filling out this form, Active Gloucestershire have offered that capacity. So there is there. So if people do want to pick up the phone or get in touch, there is a nice easy way of us helping them without sort of sending them away to go and do things on their own on a computer on their own. So there is the support on this programme if these small groups, we're going to rely on people like you, Bren, and community groups and larger organisations to get the word out. So, you know, part of us doing a Let's Talk and making the time to do something like this is to encourage people to say, look, you know, if you hear something and you think this is valid and you think this is going to suit a group, please encourage them to get in touch, because they're not just going to get an answering phone, or they're not just going to get a robot, they're going to get a person. So you know, and larger groups, trying to encourage infrastructure organizations, you know, if there are groups that are so well linked into community, that's turnover is obviously too high to personally apply, they can apply for others. So if they were to give a bit of time to help maybe some smaller groups, we would then give the money to them and trust them as an organisation we funded and supported, so they can support those small community groups. There's lots of ways that we are starting to be able to distribute funding to those smaller groups if they're not constituted or they don't have a bank account. So some of those barriers we're able to reduce, but that is if we can work with our community, with individuals like yourself, and with the larger groups who are able to give back.
Yeah, and just to give one example where it has worked well, so I think it's like on the individual, literally individual community groups, that individual was Gloucester FM radio station that, in essence, and I say this in a constructive way, didn't know about Gloucester Community Foundation. When they did, they applied and they were successful. So I think sometimes it's trying to look at those individual organisations.
Yeah.
One is literally no more than 20 metres away from the other organisation, that proximity.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, Tanita, we can all help. So maybe I'll go back to Junaid and just say, look, you know, just tell you, but for some people it's completely alien as well, really. Completely alien. They don't know what they can apply. They don't even think they've got permission to apply and whatever. Really. They do, and it is complex. So
I'd really like to add to that, Bren, because I think one thing that we've been, you know, really happy to work with the foundation with is that partnership working, and it is relying on, you know, our networks and communities to get the word out, but also, Bren, you know, if there's people that you think won't apply that would be great, just tell me and we'll get in touch, because one of the things that we've been doing as part of this grant funding is to shoulder tap specific groups and say, hey, did you hear about this? Because a lot of groups, like you say, they can be quite funding savvy, and some groups might think, well, actually this isn't for me, because, you know, I just helped such and such get into that school or something like that, and they wouldn't necessarily consider themselves eligible for the funding. But actually, after a brief conversation, you realise that they are exactly the kind of people that we want to support, and like Talitha says, they've got a very small team, and we're very happy to help, you know, with that kind of outreach and identifying some really good grassroots causes. But, you know, you are incredibly well connected, Bren, so and seem to know everybody in Gloucestershire, so please you know, by all means get in touch with me or Sarah, and we can divvy them up and approach people. So yeah, we'll be very happy to hear from you, Bren. Thank you.
No, thank you, and thanks for setting that, Talitha.
Brilliant. Has anyone not had a chance to ask any questions? Marie, I think everyone's on screen. Kieran, I don't know. Dave. Marie has Kieran and Dave. I think we've just gone over time, so I would probably suggest if anybody has any further questions, obviously do pop us an email or give us a call. And all the details are, I think they're live on the website now, aren't they, Sarah?
Yeah, it's all the criteria and the application form is on the website as well.
Brilliant. Okie doke. Well, listen, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for our Let's Talk. And thank you to Sarah and Louisa for getting this all together. And Laurie's our projects officer, at some point has something to do with something. She's got fingers in every pies. So all in all, we're really looking forward to supporting our young people getting active. So thank you so much for coming. And I'll say goodbye to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.